Dr. Laura Williams stood in front of her lab's control panel, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. The room was dimly lit, with only the glow of various monitors illuminating the space. Her invention, the translation device, sat silently in the center of the table. A small, sleek, silver sphere, no bigger than a grapefruit, its polished surface reflecting the scattered lights in the room. She had spent years on it. Years. And today was the day she would finally prove its worth. The door to the lab slid open. With a soft hiss, and her assistant, Mark, walked in. He was carrying a tablet and looked as calm as ever, as though today was just another day. But for Laura, today felt like the culmination of her life's work. Mark set the tablet on the counter and approached the device. "Everything ready?" he asked, his voice calm, but with a hint of curiosity in his tone. Laura nodded, though inside, her nerves were building. The device should be able to translate any language, any dialect from any species, she explained. It's the first device that can bridge human and alien communication seamlessly. Mark raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed but skeptical. "You're really going to make first contact today?" he asked, not fully believing it. "With real aliens?" "Yes," Laura said, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding in her chest. "The translator will allow us to speak to anyone. The device works on algorithms that detect and decode neural patterns, instantly translating thoughts into language we understand. It's as close as we'll ever get to speaking with beings from other worlds." Mark nodded slowly, clearly, in awe of the technology. But there was still a nervous tension in his shoulders, the uncertainty hanging in the air. There was no turning back now. Laura glanced at the time. It was almost time for the test. The alien species they had contacted was due to land any moment. They were in the final stages of intergalactic communication, and everything hinged on this device. She couldn't afford failure. "Okay, let's start. I'll begin the process," she said, taking a deep breath. She approached the device, her hands steady despite the racing thoughts in her head. Mark took his position at the console, ready. To monitor the data, Laura pressed a small hidden button on the device's surface. The sphere hummed softly, its surface lighting up in swirling patterns. The room seemed too quiet, the atmosphere charged with electricity. Everything was about to change. The translation device blinked once, then twice, signaling that it was active. Laura's fingers moved quickly over the console, initiating the connection. But as she did, a strange buzzing sound filled the room, followed by a soft whirring noise from the device. The lights on its surface flickered erratically. Laura's pulse quickened. "What's happening?" she muttered under her breath. Mark frowned, checking the tablet. "It's reading interference. It's not supposed to do that." Before Laura could respond, the device emitted a loud pop, and a flash of light filled the room. The sphere vibrated violently, and the hum intensified, rising to an almost painful pitch. The screens on the console flickered, as if something was going terribly wrong. "What's going on?" Mark shouted, stepping back from the console. Laura's mind raced. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment the world would witness the first communication with an alien species, and now it was failing. The translator was malfunctioning. She had no idea why or how, but something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, the buzzing stopped. The lights on the device returned to their normal rhythm, but Laura's heart sank as the room fell silent. Mark was staring at the device, a mixture of confusion and fear on his face. Laura took a cautious step toward it. The translation device seemed stable now, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone wrong. She reached out to touch it, and as her fingers made contact with the cool surface, a surge of static electricity jolted up her arm. "Laura, you need to shut it down," Mark said urgently. "This could be dangerous." But Laura wasn't listening. She was staring at the screen in front of her, watching the data unfold. It wasn't what she expected. The device wasn't just malfunctioning. It was doing something else. Something unexpected. Symbols began to appear on the screen, symbols that she didn't recognize. They were alien, but they weren't coming from the alien species she had anticipated. This was something else entirely. This isn't right," Laura whispered. This isn't the alien language we're supposed to be dealing with. Mark leaned over her shoulder, his face pale. What do you mean? What are these symbols? Lara's hand trembled as she ran the scanner over the symbols on the screen. The device's translation algorithm wasn't just translating language, it was picking up something else, something she hadn't anticipated. It was picking up emotions, fear, panic, desperation. Suddenly, the lights in the lab flickered. The building seemed to groan under some unseen pressure. And then, without warning, the communication line established a strange, distorted voice. It was soft, but unmistakable. Why? What? Why have you summoned us? The voice asked, distorted. Yet full of emotion, Lara's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what had just happened. The translation device had made contact, but not with the alien species they had been expecting. No, this was something else entirely, something unexpected, and possibly far more dangerous. The voice came again, sharper this time. What have you done? Lara's mind raced. She had been prepared for first contact, but this was a nightmare unfolding before her eyes. Something was terribly wrong. The device had failed in the worst possible way. And now, Lara was faced with the consequences. The alien species she had been hoping to communicate with may not be the ones arriving at all, and the malfunction was only just beginning. The lab was eerily silent after the distorted voice faded into nothingness. Lara stood frozen, her fingers still hovering above the console, unsure of what to do next. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding around her. The translation device, which was supposed to be the key to the future of human-alien relations, had turned into something much darker. She glanced at Mark, whose face was as pale as the light from the monitors. He looked at the screen in disbelief, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his tablet. Lara, this can't be right. This isn't what we were supposed to contact. I know, Lara whispered, her voice barely audible. But the device? It's still reading something. There's more going on here than we can see. The translation device pulsed with an unsettling light, surface flickering between various strange symbols that still didn't make sense. It wasn't alien language, it was something far more ancient and primal, something that felt like it was reaching through time itself. Mark stepped back, raising his hands in frustration. It's malfunctioning, Lara. We can't keep running these tests without understanding what's happening. This could be a breach, or worse, an invasion. Lara ignored him, her eyes glued to the screen. The voice had spoken again, but it wasn't the alien she was expecting. There was an undeniable presence in the distortion and intelligence far older and more powerful than any alien civilization they had prepared for. It was almost as if the voice was angry. Or worse, afraid, suddenly. The device hummed louder, almost as if it was alive, and the symbols on the screen rearranged themselves into a familiar shape. It was a map. Ancient map of a place that didn't exist on Earth. Lara's heart skipped a beat. She leaned closer to the monitor, trying to make out the coordinates. The map was unlike anything she had ever seen, strange symbols and cryptic lines, forming a pattern that seemed to pulse with energy. A deep rumbling noise vibrated from the device as the image continued to change. This isn't possible, Lara muttered, more to herself than to Mark. This map, these coordinates, they're pointing to a location far beyond our galaxy. Something out there has been watching us. Mark's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. Lara, we need to shut this down now. This device is sending us into dangerous territory. We don't know what this thing is or it wants. But Lara pulled her wrist away, her eyes locked onto the glowing symbols. The voice had said something earlier, something about summoning them. Why have you summoned us? It was as though they were no longer the ones in control. Whatever they had unleashed had a mind of its own. And the more Lara studied the map, the clearer it became that it wasn't simply a random error. This was intentional. Something was guiding the device's malfunctions. We can't stop now, Lara said, her voice barely a whisper. This is a chance to learn something monumental. We're not just talking to an alien species anymore. This is something much older, far beyond anything we could have imagined. We need to understand who they are, what they want.
Oh.
Mark swallowed hard. But at what cost, Lara? We don't know who or what we're dealing with here. That voice. It didn't sound like an alien at all. It was almost as if it was trying to warn us. The device suddenly whirred to life again, and the symbols on the screen shifted. Lara gasped as the map transformed into an image of a dark, cold planet. There were no visible signs of life, no oceans or forests, just endless stretches of barren land, covered in what appeared to be an ancient, long-forgotten city. As Lara tried to make sense of the image, a voice crackled through the speakers again, this time more urgent. "You have disturbed something ancient. The time is near, and it will not be stopped." The words sent a chill down Lara's spine. She could feel her heart racing, her palms sweating as the implications of what she had just heard sank in. This wasn't just about first contact. It was something much more dangerous. Something had been waiting for them, for the moment they would make the first attempt to communicate. And now, whatever it was awake. Mark, his voice shaking, took a few hesitant steps back. "What do we do now?" Lara stood still, her mind grappling with the enormity of the situation. The device had malfunctioned, yes, but what if it wasn't an error at all? What if it had been designed to lead them here, to open the door to something they were never meant to find? The map now flashed a warning sign. "Do not proceed," but it was too late. The door had already been opened. "Keep monitoring the device," Lara ordered, her voice firm despite the unease creeping into her chest. "We need to know more. This map, this voice, it's trying to tell us something, and I'm going to find out what it is." Mark stared at her, his face filled with concern. He knew they were on the edge of something terrifying, but Lara was determined to press forward. The answers were just beyond their reach, and she wasn't going to let fear stop her now. The device beeped once more, louder this time, as if beckoning them to follow its instructions. Lara knew, deep down, that she was on the precipice of something far bigger than she could have ever prepared for. But she also knew that the secrets it held could change everything. The room buzzed with a strange energy, almost as if the very walls themselves were aware of the impending arrival. Lara stood frozen, staring at the glowing symbols on the device's screen. The map had shifted once more, and now it was pointing to a specific point on the planet. It was unmistakable. The device had locked in on a location, and there was no turning back. But as she tried to make sense of the information, an overwhelming sense of dread settled in her chest. The voice from the device, the one that had sounded almost ... human, was still echoing in the back of her mind. It wasn't an alien warning. It wasn't just a malfunction. It was something else, something far more sinister. "Lara," Mark said, his voice sharp with concern. "This is insane. The device is pulling us towards something we don't understand. We've already broken protocol now. We're making first contact with who knows what. We have to stop." But Lara wasn't listening. She couldn't stop now. She had come too far. The truth was out there. She could feel it in her bones. Ignoring Mark's protests, she pressed a button on the device, activating the communication channel. The hum of energy filled the room, growing louder with each passing second. Lara's heart raced. Was she about to make history? Or had she just opened a door to something far more dangerous than she could ever imagine? The air in the room grew thick, charged with an electric tension. The lights flickered again, and for a brief moment the room seemed to warp, distorting the space around them. Then, with a sudden flash, everything went silent. Lara blinked, her breath caught in her throat. Standing before her, only a few feet away, was a figure. Was taller than any human, easily 7 or 8 feet. The skin was a deep shade of blue, smooth and almost translucent, glowing faintly in the dim light. Its limbs were long and slender, almost unnaturally so. The creature stood still, its head tilted slightly, as if studying her every move. It was an alien, no doubt about it, but not the kind she had prepared for, not the kind she had imagined. The creature's eyes were the most striking feature. They were large, jet black, with no pupils, no visible whites, just endless, bottomless voids that seemed to stare right through her. She could feel its gaze, as though it could see every thought she'd ever had, every fear she'd ever buried deep within her mind. The feeling was unnerving, to say the least. Lara's pulse quickened. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She was paralyzed, caught between awe and terror. Was this truly happening? Was this the first true contact between humans and an alien species? The creature stepped forward, its movements fluid and almost graceful. It didn't make a sound as it approached. Lara could hear the faintest hum, like a distant breeze. But it was hard to say whether it was coming from the creature or the device itself. She instinctively took a step back, but the creature didn't seem threatening. It was simply observing her, waiting for something. Finally it spoke, but the words didn't sound like words at all. They were a series of sharp, clicking sounds, so fast and complex that they seemed to echo inside Lara's mind rather than her ears. It was as if the language wasn't just auditory, it was mental, a direct transmission of thought. Lara's mind buzzed with the alien sounds. For a moment, she thought she was going crazy, hearing things that couldn't possibly exist. But then, the translation device activated, its screen flashing rapidly. The alien words on the device were translated into simple text, and the message appeared in front of her eyes. "You are not ready." Lara's heart skipped a beat. The words were simple, but their meaning was clear. This wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. The creature seemed to sense her confusion, and it took another step forward. Lara could feel the weight of its presence, the overwhelming power that seemed to emanate from it. It wasn't just watching her, it was observing. Her every thought, every action, she couldn't escape its gaze. You can understand me? Lara asked, her voice shaky. The creature nodded, its movement deliberate and slow. It didn't speak, but the sensation of thought, the overwhelming flood of emotions and images poured into Lara's mind. She felt it, a deep, ancient knowledge. It was the kind of wisdom that stretched across galaxies, beyond the reach of time itself. This being wasn't just from another planet, it was from another realm entirely. The translation device flickered once more, and a new message appeared. On the screen, "You summoned us. Now, you must answer." Lara's mind raced. What had she done? This wasn't part of the plan. She hadn't just contacted an alien species. She had reached out to something far more ancient, far more powerful than anything humanity was prepared for. And now the device had led them to this moment. She was no longer in control. The creature's eyes shifted slightly, as if considering her answer. It didn't seem angry. It didn't seem cruel. But it was indifferent cold, in a way that made Lara's skin crawl. She opened her mouth to speak again, but the words didn't come. She couldn't form a coherent thought. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This was the moment of truth, and she had no idea how to proceed. The creature, still silent, slowly extended a long, slender hand toward her. The movement was almost hypnotic, graceful in a way that made Lara feel as if she were caught in a trance. She wanted to back away, to run, but her feet were rooted to the ground. She couldn't escape. Not now. Not when the answers to everything humanity had ever wondered about lay just beyond her reach. The hand hovered in the air for a moment, inches from her face, and then the alien spoke again. But this time the words weren't for Lara. They were a command, a warning. And Lara understood, in that instant, that nothing would ever be the same. The alien's hand hovered inches from Lara's face, a strange force filling the space between them. The air itself felt heavier, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting for something monumental to unfold. Lara stood frozen, unable to look away from the creature's eyes, those endless black voids that seemed to pulse with ancient knowledge. Her thoughts were tangled, her mind unable to process what was happening. For the first time, Lara realized the full weight of the situation. This wasn't just a translation error. She hadn't merely miscommunicated with an alien race. No, something far more dangerous had been unleashed. The voice in her head, the cryptic messages, the map hit, was all part of a grander design. But what that design was, she couldn't yet comprehend. The creature, still silent, began to speak again, not in words, but in thoughts. The messages were faster this time, more urgent. She could feel the alien thoughts coursing through her, as if the creature was projecting its emotions directly into her mind: anger, frustration, a deep sense of loss. You were not meant to. No, the creature's thoughts whispered to her. This is not your time. Lara's heart pounded in her chest. Her instinct screamed at her to step back, to get away from the creature. But she couldn't. She was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by both fear and awe. The alien's presence was overwhelming. It wasn't hostile, not yet, but something was terribly wrong. She had triggered something in the device. The very thing she had built to open the door to new knowledge had now become the key to a forbidden secret. The voice, or rather the presence of the creature in her mind, deepened. You have disturbed forces beyond your understanding, it communicated, each thought laced with an intensity that felt almost physical. The price of your curiosity will be steep. Lara's mouth went dry. What? What do you mean? She whispered aloud, her voice barely audible. The creature's response was swift and clear. The hand moved toward her, its fingers elongating in an unnatural, fluid motion. As the alien reached out, its touch grazed the side of her face. Cold, electric shock that made her entire body tremble. It wasn't painful, but the sensation was like nothing she had ever felt before. It was as if the alien was probing her very soul, peeling away layers of her mind she wasn't prepared to reveal. And then a deep rumble echoed through the lab that seemed to come from beneath the very floor itself. Lara's stomach lurched. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and the lights in the lab flickered once more, this time violently, as if the building itself was reacting to the presence of the alien. Suddenly, the translation device on the table began to screech, a horrible, high-pitched noise that made Lara's head spin. She glanced back at it, her mind struggling to keep up with the chaos unraveling around her. The device had once been a beacon of progress, of understanding. But now, it was something far more dangerous. It was malfunctioning beyond repair. Its once sleek surface, now pulsing with erratic lights, a screen flashing messages and symbols she couldn't even begin to decipher. Lara, get away from it. Mark's voice cut through the dissonant noise, his panic evident. He was standing at the edge of the room, his body tense, eyes wide with fear. This is not what we agreed to. You've broken something. We have to stop this. Lara couldn't tear herself away. Her gaze was locked onto the alien, her heart thumping in her chest as the creature's hand moved closer, almost as if it was inviting her to touch it. There was something magnetic about its presence, something primal that made it impossible to look away. The alien's thoughts pulsed into her mind once more forceful this time. You cannot undo what has been set in motion. You have opened the door, and now you must face what lies beyond it. A shiver ran down Lara's spine. She wanted to protest, to argue that she had done nothing wrong, that the device was supposed to be a tool for peace, for communication. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had done more than simply make first contact with a foreign species. She had awakened something far more ancient, and possibly far more dangerous, than anything humanity was prepared for. The creature's gaze shifted, its eyes narrowing slightly, as if it had read her every thought. Oh. A dark realization hit Lara. All at once, the alien wasn't just communicating with her, it was using her. It was using her curiosity, her ambition, her need to discover the unknown, to release something far beyond her comprehension. I didn't mean to, Lara stammered, but the words felt empty, useless. The alien's response was swift and chilling. You meant to, and now you must deal with the consequences. Before she could process its words, the lights went out completely. The room was plunged into complete darkness. The faint hum of the device and the creature's presence were the only things left. A cold sweat broke out on Lara's forehead as she fumbled for the light switch, but there was no power. Then, in the pitch-black silence, a sharp crack echoed through the lab, followed by a sound that made her blood run cold, the unmistakable sound of something large, something powerful, moving in the darkness. Her breath caught in her throat. Whatever had been awakened was here. It was no longer just a mistake, it was a threat. Lara's hands shook as she fumbled for the console, desperately trying to reactivate the lab's emergency lighting. But no matter what buttons she pressed, the room remained submerged in darkness, the weight of the unknown pressing down on her, like a physical force. The hum of the alien's presence was still there, though hanging in the air deep, unsettling, and suffocating. In the silence, her thoughts raced. She had made the ultimate error, and now she was facing the terrifying consequences. The alien had been right. She had disturbed something beyond her understanding, and now she couldn't fix it. The device, her creation, had connected them to something that shouldn't have been touched. The door had been opened and there was no closing it. Lara. Mark's voice broke through the chaos, sounding distant yet frantic. Lara, we have to get out of here. Now, his words barely registered in her mind. The alien's words kept replaying, each one sinking deeper into her psyche, growing darker. You cannot undo what has been set in motion. It was true. Whatever they had awakened had already begun to stir. It wasn't going to stop until it had finished whatever it had come to do. But something inside Lara refused to give up. She couldn't let everything she had worked for, everything she believed in, be destroyed. Not like this. She had spent years designing that device. It had dreamt of bridging worlds, of bringing understanding to humanity. She couldn't let it all fall apart now, not because of a mistake that she had made. Taking a deep breath, Lara forced herself to focus. She needed to regain control, to fix the device before things escalated further. Her mind, despite the fear, creeping in, sharpened with purpose. The creature, the messages, the symbols, they were all clues. She just had to unlock the answers before it was too late. Mark, get the power back on. I need full access to the system, Lara said, her voice more steady now. The tremble in her hands was still there, but it was no longer in control. She was. What? Mark shouted from the back of the room. Are you out of your mind? We need to leave. It's not safe. I know, Lara replied, her eyes scanning the dark room. She couldn't see him, but she could hear his movements, his quick, panicked steps. But if we don't fix the device, if we don't find out what it's trying to tell us, we'll have no chance of understanding what's coming next. We have to act now. There was a moment of silence, and then Mark let out a frustrated sigh. Fine. But we're not sticking around here if this goes south. I'm not dying in some crazy lab, Lara. Lara didn't respond. She didn't have time for his doubts, not when every second that passed made the situation worse. The darkness felt like it was pressing in on her from all sides, but she couldn't let it overwhelm her. Not now. Not when there was still a chance to fix this. Her fingers flew over the console, bypassing the faulty systems as best she could. She could hear the alien's thoughts still swirling in her. Mind-rippled waves of power and fear like a storm that was building and threatening to crash. There was something else too. A presence beyond the alien in front of her. She could feel it, even through the malfunctioning device. Lara, Mark said quietly, his voice suddenly softer. I don't think we can stop this. Whatever this is, it's bigger than us. Lara took a deep breath, the words sinking into her. He was right. She had never believed in the impossible until now. The alien wasn't just here by mistake. It was an agent of something much bigger, no matter how much she wanted to deny. She couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread in the pit of her stomach. But we can't give up, she told herself. We can't. The device blinked back to life with a sudden flare of light. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. The screens flashed rapidly, showing an entirely new set of symbols. This wasn't just a malfunction. This was a message. The translation. The device was attempting to communicate, but the language it was using wasn't anything she recognized. It wasn't alien in the traditional sense. It was a cryptic mix of patterns, numbers, and unfamiliar concepts. Her mind raced. Could the symbols be a map, or maybe coordinates? She wasn't sure. But there was one thing she knew for certain. This was their only chance to decode whatever had been set in motion. Mark, she called, her voice trembling. The symbols, it's showing me a map. We need to track it. Track it. Mark's voice came through, now laced with doubt. Are you sure? This could be dangerous, Lara. We don't know what this is. No, but we don't have a choice, she replied, her heart hammering in her chest. If we don't find out what's happening, what's coming, we won't survive it. The map. It's pointing to something. I think it's a location. Maybe where the entity came from. Mark hesitated. All right, let's do this. But we need to move fast. Lara nodded, her focus narrowing to the screen. The symbols on the device flickered and shifted, slowly beginning to form a recognizable pattern, a series of coordinates that seemed almost deliberate. There was something about them, something ancient and purposeful. We're running out of time, she muttered to herself. The map was getting clearer, but it still wasn't enough. She needed more information, more understanding. She couldn't afford to be careless now. Whatever was out there, whatever had been unleashed, was coming. And it wasn't going to stop until it had its answer. The device screeched again, a high-pitched sound that made Lara's blood run cold. The symbols twisted, reforming into something far more terrifying. It wasn't a map anymore. It was a warning. Warning she hadn't expected. You were too late. The words flashed across the screen, glowing red, bold, and final. The lab seemed to shrink around her. Her pulse quickened, panic rising in her chest as the weight of the message hit her. It wasn't just a warning. It was a statement. The time has come. Lara stood motionless, her eyes locked on the device's screen. The words, the chilling crimson message, were still burned into her mind. You are too late. The finality of the statement rang in her ears like the toll of a distant bell. Air around her felt thick, heavy, as if the entire room was pressing in, suffocating her under the weight of something ancient, something she could barely comprehend. The time has come. Her heart pounded in her chest as the implications of the words settled over her. The device had been clear. Whatever had been awakened, whatever had been disturbed by her actions, was no longer something she could control. It was already here. Mark stood beside her, his face pale, his eyes darting nervously to the now glowing. Screen, Lara, he whispered, barely able to mask the fear in his voice. What do we do now? Lara's mind raced, her thoughts spinning in a whirlwind of possibilities. She had never expected things to escalate like this. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough or a first contact mission anymore. This was something else, something far darker. The creature that had appeared in front of her wasn't just an alien. It wasn't even just a representative of some alien species. It was something far older, more powerful. And whatever it represented, whatever force it was tied to, had been watching humanity for eons. Now it had been released. And it was clear that it wasn't here to make peace. I don't know, Lara finally said, her voice trembling as she fought to keep her composure. But we need to understand what this means. This device is linked to something much bigger than us. It's not just a machine. It's a conduit, a way for them to reach us. And I think it's already begun. Mark stepped back, shaking his head. No, this can't be happening. We've made contact, Lara, but this is wrong. I don't care what your research says. This thing, it's too much. We'll have to get out of here. Can't control it. Lara's eyes stayed fixed on the device as she tried to process what Mark was saying, but deep down, she knew he was right. This wasn't something that could be controlled. It wasn't something that could be stopped by the push of a button or the flick of a switch. It had gone too far. The rumble from earlier soft but growing sounded again, this time louder. The floor beneath her feet trembled, and a low, eerie hum filled the room, vibrating her very bones. The lights in the lab flickered as the energy in the room grew heavier, more oppressive. The device had activated something in the air, something unseen but profoundly felt. Lara's pulse quickened. It's coming, Mark, Lara whispered urgently, her voice now steady with the clarity that only fear could bring. We can't run, like it's already too late for that. We need to find out what it wants, what it's going to do. Eyes were wide with panic, but Lara could see the moment his will wavered, the flicker of understanding in his gaze. He wasn't ready to accept it, but he knew deep down that there was no turning back. The device's screen flickered again, a new set of symbols flooding across the display. This time, they weren't cryptic. They were direct. Coordinates. But not just any coordinates. These led to a remote location on Earth, a place long buried in history, where civilizations had vanished centuries ago. Lara, look, Mark said. His voice strained. He pointed at the screen, his finger trembling. Those ... those are ancient coordinates. That's not just a map. That's a direct route to something buried. A place lost in time. Lara's breath caught in her throat. No, she whispered, unable to pull her eyes away from the screen. That's not just a location. That's the key. The coordinates pointed to a place deep within the Mountain Zane area no one had dared to explore. A place that, according to old texts, had been the site of an ancient and catastrophic event. As if on cue, the voice of the alien being echoed again in her mind, its presence pressing into her thoughts, sharp and insistent. You have found the threshold. Yes. You have opened the door. Now you must walk through it. Lara's breath hitched. Threshold. Door. The words hit her like a wave. This wasn't just about first contact. It wasn't about discovering a new species or unlocking a new chapter in human history. It was an awakening. It had tapped into something far older than any of them could have imagined. And now, it was telling them to come to step into the unknown. Mark backed away, his eyes filled with disbelief. No way. You can't be thinking, I have to. Lara cut him off, her voice firm. The device, the alien, the message, it's all leading us to this place. This is the only way we'll understand what's happening. If we don't go now, we'll never get another chance. Mark opened his mouth to argue, but he stopped himself, his gaze shifting to the trembling screens and the growing hum in the air. He knew she was right. There was no other choice. Fine, he said, his voice resigned. But if this goes south, we're not sticking around, you understand? Lara nodded, her heart racing. She didn't have time to explain everything. The time for questions had passed. The time for action was now. The screen flickered one last time, and then the coordinates locked in place. The final message appeared clear, cold, and definitive. Prepare yourself. Lara turned toward the door. She had no idea what awaited them. But she knew one thing for certain. Whatever they were about to face, it was only the beginning. The journey to the coordinates was long, fraught with uncertainty and tension. Lara and Mark had prepared for a trip into the mountains, but they hadn't prepared for the dread that gnawed at them the entire way. With every passing mile, the air felt heavier, more suffocating. The map from the device had led them to an isolated spot deep in the wilderness far from civilization, as if the earth itself wanted to hide whatever lay buried beneath it. As their jeep rumbled over the rugged terrain, Lara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It wasn't paranoia. It was something far more instinctual in ancient primal sense, that they weren't alone in this world anymore. Whatever had been unleashed by the device, it was far more than just an alien intelligence. It was a force that had always been. They're waiting, watching, waiting for the right moment to make itself known. The sun had started to set, casting an eerie orange glow over the jagged peaks ahead. The mountains loomed like ancient sentinels, their towering figures casting long shadows. In the distance, Lara could just make out the outline of an abandoned, structured ruins. Perhaps, or something else. Mark, his eyes fixed on the horizon, finally broke the silence. Lara, I don't know about this, he muttered. This is insane. You heard that voice? It was like it was calling us. But I'm not sure I want to find out why. Lara didn't respond immediately. Her hands gripped the wheel tighter, her gaze fixed ahead. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew one thing. They were close. Closer than she had ever been to understanding the truth. As the jeep slowed to a stop in front of the structure, Lara felt her breath catch in her throat. The ruin before them was not just ancient, it was otherworldly. It was as if the building itself had been crafted by hands that didn't belong to this planet. The stonework was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint, unnatural glow. They weren't just decorative. They were part of something far larger, something that had existed long before human history had even begun. Lara stepped out of the jeep, her heart pounding. The air around her felt charged, as if the very ground beneath her feet was humming with energy. She could feel it in her bones. Something was awake, and it was waiting for them. Mark hesitated, then followed her out, his footsteps hesitant. "This place, it feels wrong," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. "Like it's alive." "It's not alive," Lara said, her voice sharp. "It's ancient, and it's been waiting." They approached the structure slowly, each step weighed down by the fear and anticipation that seemed to echo in the very air around them. As they drew closer, Lara could see a massive doorway and archway, framed by towering stone pillars, each etched with symbols that seemed to glow brighter as they neared. The threshold was imposing, and the shadows it cast were deep and thick. Mark stopped just short of the doorway, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and dread. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low. "Wait. We don't even know what's inside. What if this is a trap?" Lara's gaze never left the entrance. The voice, "The time has come," still echoed in her mind. She'd been given no choice but to move forward, to uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous. "I'm sure," she said, her voice unwavering. "Whatever this is, it's part of the plan. Our plan, and we need to see it through." Mark didn't argue. They both knew there was no turning back now. Together, they crossed the threshold. The moment they stepped inside, the world seemed to shift. The air was thick with something ancient and unfamiliar. The walls of the structure seemed to pulse with energy, and the symbols on the stone began to glow more brightly. The feeling of being watched intensified, the presence of something immense, something far older than humanity, pressing down on them from all sides. And then, the ground beneath their feet rumbled a low, deep growl that seemed to come from within the very earth itself. A sound like the groan of an ancient beast awakening after a long, dark slumber. The ground split open before them, revealing a massive chamber far below. A cold wind rushed up from the depths, carrying with it the scent of earth and dust, and something else, something metallic. The very walls of the chamber were lined with strange, glistening metal, like a vast alien vessel buried deep beneath the mountains. Lara stepped forward, her heart racing as she looked down into the abyss. She could feel it now, the answer. This was what had been waiting. This was what had been summoned. "I think we've found it," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and terror. Mark's voice cracked. "What is it? What's down there?" Before Lara could answer, the ground shifted again, and from the depths, something began to rise. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't a being. It was something else, something more. A massive, glowing structure emerged from the dark, its shape familiar yet alien. It was a ship, a vessel unlike anything Lara had ever seen. Its surface shimmered, its lights flashing like distant stars. The symbols from the stone walls seemed to flow across its surface, connecting it to everything around them. Lara took a step forward, mesmerized. This... This is it. This is what we've been looking for." But before she could take another step, the voice echoed in her mind once again. "Welcome, Lara. You have found the key.
Ow.
You will understand." And with that, the ship's massive doors began to open.